Welcome to the very first edition of Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
Otherwise known as Mrs. Galloway. Every week, through the lens of London, we'll be covering the stories that made it into the news, and those that didn't, but should have. It'll be news from elsewhere, and from a different point of view, ours.
But yours too, through our social media portal. You can supply us with your views on Twitter at RT_Sputnik, or from the streets of London, where we are out and about every week to listen to your voice.
His name was Bond, James Bond. Licensed to kill, regularly shaken, but never stirred. He was on Her Majesty's Secret Service. But it's a service that's secret no more. His commander, whose very existence it was an offence to divulge, used to sign himself C. And if I had told you his real name, I would have had to kill you. Though the service was often more Austin Powers than James Bond, its very shroud of mystery lent it an aura of glamour. Now well and truly lost after a parade of cock-ups, conspiracies and farce. Last week, the shroud was fully removed for the first time when the heads of Britain's domestic and foreign secret intelligence services were forced to appear in public before the cameras in front of a parade of British MPs. And look at those faces. Austin Powers indeed at MI5. At GCHQ we had Sir Ian Lobham, all hay, no needle. And over at MI6, Sir John Sawyers is nothing much to see.
Well, that's really unprecedented. From the shadow to the spotlight, what led to that?
Well, the proximate cause is Edward Snowden, safely ensconced in Russia and having spilled the beans, which are now spilling all over the place. They're causing a crisis between allies, the United States and Britain, with France and Germany. And Snowden's revelations, of which there are more to come, have cast this spotlight on the whole spying game. And the public, and certainly the Parliament, feels utterly betrayed and bypassed and powerless to some extent to do anything about it. So, in the good old British way, a parade of flunkies from the intelligence services has appeared before a parade of parliamentary flunkies. Every one of those people on the committee are themselves hand-picked, security cleared to even be on that committee. So there was no chance they were going to ask them any difficult questions. But the very act of being dragged, blinking into the light, will have been very humiliating for the formerly secret heads of the British secret services.
Well, so unimpressive were the three spies that Scad Atkins tweeted, "These three spy bosses look like they work for Centrica." To which Megacry's response, "Are they just patsies, not the real spy bosses? They're really secret."
Well, maybe not patsies, definitely pasties. Now, later we'll be talking to legendary British spy writer Philip Knightley, formerly of Britain's Sunday Times, a best-selling author, and the man who secured the interview with the equally legendary Kim Philby, who, while serving at the top of British secret services, was also a colonel in the KGB. But first, we sent our own sleuth out and about to talk to the public about the spying game.
As you know, it's been revealed that the state is spying on its civilians by keeping all your searches, all your emails, everything. The state has all. How do you feel about that?
I guess one shouldn't be surprised because you see it in sci-fi movies and novels, and they usually are true.
I didn't know they did keep a record of absolutely everything.
It's all in GCHQ now.
All my texts, all my emails.
All your email searches, all your email and your internet search.
I don't feel very good about that, no. I feel like my privacy has been invaded.
I feel violated, but it's something that I'm sort of used to because I'm Egyptian and we've been used to... We've had a lot of problems with the US regarding that matter.
There's nothing you can do. They'll get the information one way. It's how they use it is the worst thing.
But are you angry about it?
Not really angry, just I'm not angry that they do it. I'm angry in the way that they might use it, but you can't be a member of society these days and not get away with that. Otherwise, you wouldn't live anywhere. You wouldn't have any credit cards. You wouldn't be able to interact in any way.
Now, as I said, my first guest today knows all there is to know about the spying game. He's Philip Knightley. Philip, thanks very much for joining us on the first edition of Sputnik. You've seen the parade of the heads of the security services in front of a parade of tame MPs, I must say. Mm-hmm. Things ain't what they used to be. Mm-hmm. How much have they changed?
Well, they've changed radically. You can't move anywhere these days without being bugged. Everything is... They sweep the entire electromagnetic spectrum. That's their own phrase. And nothing can escape it. And it's very dispiriting that people accept it so readily.
Indeed. Now you, of course, as I said earlier, wrote Philby, The Master Spy, and The Second Oldest Profession. You looked at spying in the 20th century. What are the biggest changes between spying in the 20th century and spying in the 21st?
The use of computers. The National Security Agency of the United States measures its computers in acres rather than number of machines, and they sweep the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Nothing can escape them.
But is it any more effective? I mean, in the days you were writing about, spies left messages on paper in dead letter drops and shadowed each other, followed them around. Mm. Were they more effective now or less effective?
Less effective, because the people would not accept, back in the good old days of spying, that anybody could be so interested in their private affairs that they would bug them or to examine them and what they were doing, and bugging the entire electromagnetic spectrum has reached a stage now where a spy is not only content with sweeping the ether for all the stuff that's there, but is doing it on a professional basis. There are no isms anymore. A real spy these days is a young man who is interested only in putting together a professionally run spy organization and selling it to the material he's got to the highest bidder.
The people that you are writing about came from a certain class in British society, and they were very few in number. The security services were numbered probably in their hundreds at the beginning, maybe scores at the very beginning. But now, of course, these intelligence services have ballooned out of all proportion, out of all recognition.
Yes, they're the greatest 20th century growth industry.
I mean, you're on record as saying that the whole thing is a con trick, basically.
Yes, because governments found a long while ago that it was much easier to control a population if that population was imbued with a little bit of fear. And once they realized that, everything that they've aimed at since has been to enhance that fear and make it more difficult for an ordinary citizen to keep any secrets at all.
These chaps now at the head, they're not exactly James Bonds, are they? I mean, one of our Twitter feeds said that they look more like the men who run Centrica or British Gas. Were they legendary figures before? Were they men of military bearing, more impressive perhaps than they look today?
I think so in some ways. I mean, I admire Philby, for example, because he was a man who made a commitment to what he believed to be an important political cause when he was quite young at Cambridge and kept that commitment come what may. Today's spy has not got the same commitment. He'll sell the material that he gathers to any buyer. And he's not interested in isms, communism, capitalism, anything like that. He's just interested in the material that he can gather and sell.
One of the things that stuck out for me in those Vox Pops, Gayatri, was how fatalistically people seem to have accepted all of this.
Well, not really fatalistic. It's just that they feel powerless, with the state spying on them. It's different from corporate companies spying on them. That's what the Washington Post revealed from their research. You can get away from companies spying on you. You can boycott companies. You can not go to those companies. But where can you go away from the state?
Are we done for, Philip? I mean, is 1984 arrived?
Yes.
Big time?
Yes.
Big Brother's with us and we can't get rid of him?
Yes, we can't get rid of him. I know that's a terribly pessimistic attitude to take, but the computers are so all-reaching, being operated by people who are so amoral that we can't get away from them. It's here to stay. And I'm very pessimistic about the future of anybody trying to keep a secret about anything.
They're not likely to have been terrified by the parliamentary committee. They're not likely to have gone away with their knees knocking together, quailing before the ferocious interrogation. Did they have more respect for Parliament before? Were they more afraid of Parliament before?
Yes.
Or have they always been essentially out of control?
Well, I would say the latter. They've always been essentially out of control because it's been easier for them to twist Parliament around their little finger. They have no respect for Parliament. They only have respect for what they call the realm. It's something that's...
The deep state.
Yes, the deep state. It's undefinable, and they refuse to define it. So we're not going to tell you what we consider the state to be, the realm of the state, but our loyalty is to the realm and not the government of the day.
Fascinating. Philip Knightley, author of Philby, KGB Master Spy, and The Second Oldest Profession. Thanks very much for joining us here on Sputnik. Now, after the break, I'll be talking to another legendary British newsman, Robert Fox, defence correspondent with London's Evening Standard, on the eve of the centenary of the First World War. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sputnik. Now, every year in Britain, in November, there is a wave of solemn commemoration of the end of the First World War. There's a minute's silence throughout the land. People wear poppies, and increasingly, there's a great deal of pressure to wear them if you're anybody at all in public life. And everyone solemnly remembers the death of millions of people in what they call the Great War, 1914 to 18. However, this year it will have special importance because on January 1 next year, the British government has allocated £300 million for commemorative events of the centenary of World War I. They clearly intend to locate that war in a spectrum of honourable British military engagements. Indeed, they will call it a victory. It's my point of view that the First World War was perhaps the greatest crime ever committed by Britain's ruling elite on its own people. Lions were sent to their death in their hundreds of thousands, sometimes scores of thousands in a single day. Lions led by donkeys. So we sent Gayatri out onto the streets of London again, Gayatri.
Yes, indeed. And of course, I saw a lot of people wearing their poppies, and so I gathered their opinions.
Let's have a look.
Next year is going to be the centenary of the First World War, so there's going to be a lot of celebration about it. How do you feel about that?
I don't think it's something that should be celebrated. I think it's tragic war completely. I just feel sorry for all the soldiers, to be honest with you.
I don't think it's anything to celebrate.
Just a waste of millions of lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think better to celebrate the end of it rather than the beginning.
Yeah, I think in a way you have got to celebrate because it shows that you have got to have a certain amount of respect for it. And I think celebrating it shows that we have respect for it.
Well, I mean, not the celebration, I would say. I mean, it's more
just to commemorate, probably. It's a commemoration to say sorry for the people who lost their lives over there.
Yeah, I think it's distasteful. I think it should be more in line with like Remembrance Sunday, where it's a little bit more individual rather than a national celebration type thing.
Now, my next guest knows all there is to know about the arts of war and indeed the history of it. He's the legendary British newsman, the Evening Standard's war correspondent, Robert Fox. Robert, thanks for joining me on Sputnik. You heard mixed views from the public there. My thesis, I'll be candid, is that the First World War represented a kind of crime, a giant war crime, against the people of this country and other countries. A quarrel between cousins that could have been resolved around the breakfast table at Balmoral.
That's a very interesting thesis, and I think it counts for about 0.0001% of the whole argument. As you say, it was a massive game changer. I would agree with you. It was an absolutely unnecessary war. More than a crime, it's worse. It was a folly. It was a terrible, terrible folly that how they pushed into this. People talked about the coming Great War. People talked about the need to construct a coming great peace. But there's another side to it, George, which I'm surprised that you didn't raise, but which we will do, is if you look at particularly somebody like the Chancellor Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel barely wants even to mention the Great War, and I do understand why she says she thinks, and it's a very good argument, that the follies and madness of the Great War and the sense of unfair defeat in Germany, and not exclusively like that, led to an even greater war in terms of numerical humanity destroyed in the Second World War. In other words, led to the rise of fascism. And what I think came out from your Vox Pop, which is related to that, which is so interesting, is that only but one said, let's commemorate this, for goodness sake, let's not celebrate this. But people before the Great War were celebrating war. Famously the Futurists, famously the poet Gabriele D'Annunzio in Italy, and would you believe it, in the big non-fiction prize in the UK this very week, what has won the prize? A book about D'Annunzio, which I'm absolutely horrified by the way. And there was this militancy in the German military machine. There was the Plan D Set, there was the Schlieffen Plan, there was the plan that said by surgical use, they would say, to use an anachronism, of mechanized war, we can capture Paris, it'll all be over, and then it's Deutschland über alles, and then we can set the new industrial system. It was letting loose this new mechanized group of horsemen of the apocalypse, of mechanized industrial war, because as Eric Hobsbawm, the noted and terrific Marxist historian, said, this was the beginning of the long war. This was a war that didn't really finish until the 1990s, and that is why it is so terrible. It has to be looked at, but you can't ignore it and you can't belittle it. It is part of our collective memory. I'm as passionate as you are about it, but it's very important to look this beast in the eye and look at it for what it is.
The reason we use the word celebrate is there will be a definite attempt to link it to World War II, a truly great war, but one which had to be fought, and in which we were on the right side and stood for a period alone. Truly our finest hour. But the First World War wasn't like that. Isn't it the case the Second World War was the good war and the First World War the bad war?
Oversimplistic, George. I'm sorry. Because did it have to be fought? That I would argue the Second World War, by the time we got to 1940, probably yes. But I take the thesis of my old friend and tutor, A.J.P. Taylor. Alan's point is this, and I think it applies to the First World War in its time as well. Really, with the Munich system, in a way you could see when the Munich settlement, the piece of paper, appeasement over Czechoslovakia was achieved, he said, in a way that was achievement of diplomacy. It's rather like Iran talks at the moment. You've got to put in the basement, the ground floor, and build on it. And they should have built on it. They didn't know how to do it. Then the whole system broke down. Arguably, you could have avoided the First World War, and very likely had they been clever, from the very end of the First World War through, you could have avoided the Second World War. Hindsight's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and journalists indulge in it as much as historians. But it was a chapter of terrible, terrible mistakes. And as usual, it's a wonderful march of folly and stupidity. And that is what is so upsetting. Because I'm very worried about the good war thesis, by the way, because then you say good wars, imitation of the Studs Terkel oral histories of this, is fought by good guys. And this perhaps was the approach of a very famous war correspondent like Ernie Pyle, G.I. Joe. But as actually Ernie Pyle, who was a terrific journalist, said G.I. Joe was in the mud and in the poo as much as everybody and as much from their commanders. I mean, sort of things with the Second World War, just thinking we're going to come up to the commemoration of the D-Day landings, the liberation of Europe. They bombed 75,000 French civilians to death in the opening month and a half of the D-Day invasion or the D-Day liberation. Yes, I'm being contrary. I'm being what I was brought up to be, and I was brought up to just inquire about the news, past, present, and future, and look at it in the face. There's a lot of sentimentality that goes with history, and this is where I agree with you. You will go from shock and awe to schlock and awe. You will get very, very sentimental, and you get this sort of quasi-maudlin celebratory mood. There's nothing to celebrate about the First World War at all, except perhaps the liberation of women, and appalling that women could be released into the workplace to responsible activity. Then they tried to put the lid on. I'm just talking about this country, that it had to happen that way. Why on earth?
Now, we're at the anniversary, of course, of the Russian Revolution. Lenin, upon coming to power, opened the books. And the secret dealings, for example, in the Middle East, Sykes-Picot.
You're quite right, George, because everybody forgets that it wasn't just between Britain and France, it was Britain, France and Russia.
Yes,
and indeed. The Guardian.
Indeed.
The Manchester Guardian revealed Lenin's discoveries.
Indeed, indeed. A fantastic interview. You really are the doyen of war reporters and analysts of the grisly arts of war. Robert Fox of the Evening Standard in London. Thank you for joining us on Sputnik. Well, at this point in the show, we listen to you through our internet portal, on Twitter, RT_Sputnik. We receive your point of view, and Gayatri processes it. How has it been this week?
Well, it's been very, very busy. People have been supplying us with a lot of feedback on the question how they feel about the First World War. For example, Anthony Rodriguez says, my view of World War I is that it's the last time the world went to war based on monarchist ties, ancient treaties, family and blood links. Idi Amin adds to him saying, if only Queen Victoria had still been alive, she could have put her grandsons across the knee and spanked them.
Well, that's a very good point. It was two cousins. The King and the Kaiser were cousins with the same grandmother, the English Queen Victoria. If only she could have sorted it out around the dinner table.
I also asked the people how they feel about spying, whether they feel threatened and whether their internet behavior has changed. And, well, a bit of the same response from the streets of London. Saul Hudson, for example, says, never labored under the illusion that our mail and phone calls were not being monitored. All governments do it.
Well, but the gathering hay, as it was put in the parliamentary session, if someone had said before the internet existed that every single letter you ever write or receive will be opened by a government agent and copied and stored, there would have been a revolution on the streets of Britain. I'm amazed that people have gone so calmly, quietly into this good night.
Well, perhaps because at the time it was physical, yeah? It was really had to open the seal, and now everything's virtual. Our identities are all out there.
Indeed.
Martin adds, it gives those in power a false sense of security. Too much data for them to deal with. Hashtag lose it on a train anyway.
Well, I mean, they say they're gathering all the hay so that they can find the needle. But so many times they don't find any needle, even though the needle is out there and an idiot in a hurry could have spotted it. The Woolwich murder, for example.
Indeed.
The person accused, alleged to have committed that awful murder, was preaching every Friday and Saturday in the main streets of South London this message of hate and fanaticism. Yet he doesn't appear to have been under any surveillance, whilst you, me and everyone else here in this studio is under surveillance. Our hay is being gathered and looked at.
Nabila Ali, however, thinks that every country must be sensitive about its security. So what's wrong about that?
Well, everybody needs security, but if you sacrifice liberty for security, you'll end up with neither liberty nor security.
Who said that again?
So said Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the good old United States of America. That, though, is all that we have got time for. I hope you enjoyed the first edition of Sputnik and that you'll come aboard with us next week at the same time.
So please keep your tweets coming at RT_Sputnik. Goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.